let people flow in. So we'll just let you do that. Okay, so it's time to start. So we're going to start as we always do on time, and a very warm welcome to our 164th Security Thought Leadership webinar. Now, those of you who join us regularly know that what we do on these thought leadership webinars is we critique what's going on today in order that we may better understand a topic, that we may begin to interpret it more thoughtfully, and that serves as a guide to how we might progress. So we're not trying to solve the world's problems today, we're trying to generate insights and idea. And our topic today is one that I think has a worldwide application. Procuring security, what should guide security buying practices? And many of you will know that there is this view that the problem with the security sector around the world is buyers buy cheap, suppliers supply cheap, and the quality is not good, and the spirals downwards. And others say, get real, this is business. Start to understand the realities of business and react accordingly. Well, in a minute, what I'm going to do, as I always do, is I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. And once I've done that, I will then invite each of them to make an opening statement. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want to say about this topic. Once that's done, I will then invite discussion. So please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. That's the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll endeavour to incorporate anything that you want to say into the ensuing discussion. So without further ado, then, let's go and meet our panel. And let me first of all go over to Ireland and meet Finbar. Finbar, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Martin. Thank you. I'm Finbar McCarthy. I've been in the security industry for 27 years. I've worked on both sides of the fence, both on the vendor side and in-house. I've spent the last 20 years working in-house for corporate US companies. I've managed the man guarding operations in particular from a procurement perspective, from programs ranging from $500,000 a year up to $20 million a year, both local and global programs. And I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you, Martin.
Finbar, thank you very much indeed. I should just tell you, hot off winning an Irish Oscars. Okay, thank you very much indeed. From Ireland, we go all the way to Africa. And Gaitan, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Gaitan Banzi. I'm a full member of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply UK. I have experience of about 17 years in procurement, and I've been dealing with the procurement of security services for quite a number of years in the private sector as well as the public institutions. I worked with the government of Tanzania as well as the international organization, including USAID, United States Agency for International Development, and currently I'm implementing World Bank projects. So it is my pleasure to be among the panelists today. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's a pleasure to have you. And finally, let's go to the south coast of England and meet Roberto. Roberto, please introduce yourself.
Martin, good afternoon. So, Roberto Fiorentino, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Croma Security Solutions Group, PLC. I've been in the industry working in all areas of security for more than 41 years. There are a number of innovations and changes that I've seen throughout that time, and we have led with some of those. Likewise, I'm delighted to be able to put some rather specific points across on this subject.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, we get a lot of praise around the world for our panel. Clearly, 3 experts coming at this from very different angles. Let's hear what they've got to say. 3 minutes, opening statement, when they can say whatever they want to say about this topic. Finbar, your opening statement, please.
Thanks, Martin. In relation to purchasing of security services, I think some of the challenges that security managers find is that they mistakenly believe that the procurement department are there to help them make a purchase. The procurement department is there to ensure that the business gets the best value for money, not always to help us make the best decisions. As security managers, when we make decisions for security purchases, we always know what we want from the perspective of we need man guarding. We know how to deploy that when the time comes. But the challenge is we don't always know how to know why we need it, and making it making an articulate case to the business in relation to why we need that service. And last of all, you get the service you tolerate. I think it's really important that we understand that if we don't manage our services correctly and we don't build the proper KPIs into our contractual agreements, then you will get the service that you tolerate.
Thank you very much indeed, Finbar. Really interesting points there, and some things we can build into the discussion. Don't forget, if you'd like to pick up on anything, please do use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to incorporate that in the discussion that follows. Okay, Gaitan, please, your opening statement.
Thank you. Most emphasis on purchasing or procurement of security is put on the lower prices rather than the quality, and that is the issue on outcome or on the performance of the contracts, whereby the selected vendors or selected service providers most of the time fail to deliver the expected outcomes by the procuring entities. So this is the most important thing to consider, that when we procure or we purchase the security services, it is completely different procuring with goods, whereby we need to put much emphasis on the quality. And sometimes we lack expertise. We lack expertise on the purchasing of the security or services requirements, where we end up with people focusing on the price other than on the quality that we intend to achieve. Also, the issue of detailed security requirements, also it's an issue whereby we prepare an incomplete requirements which lender to achieve services or which with the low qualities. So all this need to be considered, the most approaches, the most modern approaches to the procurement or purchase of the security services, which should not, the focus should not be the best, the lowest price. Also, we need to consider experienced qualifiers, that we need to consult the experienced people. Also, we need to check the references. And sometimes we need to obtain management support while procuring the security services, so that the management could understand what should be the focus during the procurement of services compared to the procurement of goods. The most important thing also, we need to conduct the evaluation of those who are selected to provide us the security services at the beginning of the procurement process and during the provision of the services. This will be very important to determine if the service provider selected will be of that expected outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, plenty more we can come back on there as well. Don't forget, if you'd like to join this discussion, please do get your questions in using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, let's move on then. Let's hear from Roberto. Roberto, I'm interested to hear what you've got to say. Over to you.
Martin, thank you. I think the number of years working in security has led us to certain conclusions, and the experience for me is more about purchasers not being fully aware of the importance of thoroughly assessing the risks and the threats. And this results in them not spending enough time discussing potential solutions and options really with professionals. They seem to remain focused, in my opinion, on comparisons between product offerings, be that in the CCTV sector, the intruder alarms, the quality of the manned guarding, the access control perimeter, all areas of security. And what this does is it results in time and energy spent negotiating best rates and looking at complex features and reporting within products and systems. Often, no one has truly studied or understood the risk that the client or the target is facing. and frequently purchasers engage organizations that are specialists in certain areas of security. This is a very important point, because what it means is that those suppliers remain focused on solving problems using limited scope of products that are available to them, and not always what is best for the purchaser. Looking at what do we think, what factors need to change to improve security, it's really straightforward. Communication and education around the importance of thorough risk assessment and planning before even considering what products we might like to use. Time should be set aside to select consultants or suppliers that are able to offer a more holistic overview of the purchaser's absolute requirements. Whilst many purchasers' risks will be similar, setting aside time to actually engage in real conversation with knowledgeable individuals and cite target specifics, as this really is, for me, the only way that you're going to have an effective solution and value for money product that is delivered. Thinking about what an outstanding practice might look like in this purchasing, for me, an outstanding practice would engage all of the things I've just talked about or mentioned. But to really have impact, purchasers should also consider solution design not only for sustainability, but also functionality and ease of use, because I see systems that fail due to their complex operations and procedures. So even finally, I will sum up with even straightforward solutions still require good communication and a full understanding by the operators and users to improve efficiency and effectiveness. I think that's my experience on it, Martin. Thank you.
Roberto, thank you very much indeed. But let me just come back to you then to start the question rolling, because in a way that sounds very, very, very logical. Who could disagree with better make sure you understand the problem, make sure you focus on a solution which encompasses what you said. Given the fact that in a sense it sounds obvious, what are the strategic barriers to achieving that? Where would you put the blame? And Finbar, I'll come to you straight after before I come to Gaitan. What do you think is where can we look to say, correct that?
Are you asking me this?
Yeah,
Martin?
Roberto first, please.
Yes. I think to answer the question, it is an immense challenge we've all faced in the security industry for a long time. And one of the reasons is that there is a lack of understanding in the purchaser in the world of security. They do not understand our world of security. And sometimes, as I said, we have certain organizations that only work in certain areas of security, which restricts them. So it comes back to my point of education and communication to explain the importance of getting this right. One area that might be helpful to us, of course, is legislation, fire regulations, escape regulations, insurance companies that will set standards and force particular clients down a certain channel or route. But there really is it really is a challenge that we have no immediate solution for, to educate purchasers to spend time and energy engaging with a specialist to get the right answers. I think that sums it up, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, Finbar, let me come to you, because Finbar, you, as you said in your opening statement, worked on both sides over time. You raised a few points. And once again, you think, well, that sounds straightforward. Where would you put the barrier to achieving the obvious, in inverted commas, if I can put it like that? And Gaitan, I'll come to you after Finbar. Finbar.
Yeah, I think Roberto hit on some interesting points there when you talk about risk and understanding your risk. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have, that as security professionals, we don't tend to reach out to others in our industry for advice. We don't like people to know that we don't know. We don't like people to know that we don't have all the answers. And in doing so, we actually limit our ability to make good decisions. And again, when we talk about the procurement process, we have to understand again that the procurement teams have their own set of drivers in relation to supporting the procurement of products. And they don't always work in tandem with our requirement from a security perspective to purchase the best product. And I think when we talk about the vendors themselves, the biggest challenge I would see, and I mean no disrespect to vendors, but when you sit on the procurement side of the fence, you look at a vendor who is charging you 20 euros for a service an hour, and another vendor that's charging 25. And when you ask what's the difference between the two, it's, if you don't understand why and what your risk is, it's going to be very difficult to explain why you want a product that's costing more if you can't actually understand what your risk is and what you're trying to achieve in fixing. So again, coming back around in the circle, it's back to the individual purchaser, as Roberto referred to it, the security manager, to be able to park the ego at the door, reach out to those professionals who understand the business and say, hey, help me here, work with me here. Because again, as I said, you get the service you tolerate. And if you don't know what that service should look like, if you don't know what the industry standard KPIs are for this product, for delivering this service, if you're making them up because you think they're the best, then you're going to tolerate a service that may be subpar to what your industry requires.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Well, guys, let me come to you on this, because a few years ago, I interviewed procurement people. And one of the procurement professionals, one of the things that came through those interviews was, look, we are not experts in security. We're experts in buying. And the security sector really has got to get its act together, not put the emphasis on procurement professionals, but start putting the emphasis on explaining its point of difference. And that rather than look outwards, we got to put it back on them and say, get your act together. It's your fault entirely. You just need to present this better. Gaitan, is that a fair view or not?
Yeah, that's an issue. And as you mentioned, we as a procurement specialists, we are not much familiar with we are not technical person for the requirements, for example, the security. So most of the time we expect, or we expect to get guidance or support from the technical people. And that's where the problem is. And as mentioned earlier, that there is a lack of expertise of personnel tasked with the procurement security services or other services. So it needs to be a teamwork. And if the teamwork is not there, it ends up with accepting abnormally low tenders and saying that because we are going to save much, this is the good deal, why you are not getting the quality of the services that you are looking for. Also, it can lead into entering into unnecessarily complicated terms and conditions, because only the procurement person is looking on the saving cost other than looking at the quality of the services. So this is a challenge whereby we as procurement professionals, we need the support from the technical people to make sure that we achieve what the organization is looking for. But if we are not working closely or we are not working together, then we end up with what is happening now, that most of the organization are buying these services, for example, the security services at the lower cost, with a lot of repercussion during the implementation, where the service providers fail to deliver what the organization expects, and even could lead to some impacts on the services that are delivered. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, let me come back to you, Finbar, on this, because herein we've got one of the tensions, okay? That procurement people are not specialists in security. They're relying on the security expert internally. And you and Roberto have just identified some of the issues about expertise. I've got a question here from Simon Pears. Let me put it to you first, Finbar. Is part of the challenge that corporate security teams are not always involved in the RFI, RFP, process and therefore are excluded from the design stage of the selection. Well, let me ask you that question. Is that part of the problem, Finbar? And of course, if it is, it really again puts the focus back on the security sector rather than the procurement side. Finbar first, and then I'll come to Roberto.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statement. And I think the problem there is with the corporate security professionals that allow that to happen. And again, you know, I make the statement, you get the service you tolerate. If you're not part of the process, then the process is going to fail you. And you have to be pushing that envelope all the time to get that seat at the table. And again, to get that seat at the table is before you ever get into an RFP process, an RFI process, you've got to understand your data. You've got to understand the existing KPIs and where your vendor is failing, because that's why we're going out to tender, right? Because our vendor is failing. You have to be able to demonstrate through your data points that these are the issues. Here's where we're failing. These are the points at which this vendor is not able to provide me with the service I need to mitigate the risk that I have. And then through that process, you identify the risks, you show your vendor, your current vendor can't support you, and then you take your procurement team and your leadership team on a journey with you. And you need to tell them a story, you need to explain to them what's happening. I think it was Albert Einstein that said that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it. So that's why, again, take it back to what I said at the opening. You need to understand your why. Why am I going out to tender? What service do I need? Why am I doing this? And then take them on a journey. But if you're at the point where you're not at the table, then you've got a bigger problem. You need, as a security professional, to get with your procurement people and make sure you're the person making the decisions to go out to tender with your data in your hand.
I mean, and this is a point, Roberto, I'm coming to you because it strikes me as a supplier, you are really on the end of a major problem here, Roberto. No matter how good you are or your company is, you first of all got to hope that the internal corporate security team get their act together. And if they have got their act together, you've got to hope that they've engaged the procurement and make sure the procurement are on message. And then you've got to hope the business backs a decision. Seems a tall order.
I think it is a tall order, but there clearly is a responsibility on both sides. I think the experts in security should be confident and knowledgeable enough to be able to lay down in front of the purchasers the seriousness of what is going on. Admittedly, you have to be given the opportunity to do that. And sometimes when you get a bland tender document, and I remember many years ago for a very world famous hotel, which we ultimately won the tender to secure, went out to 36 companies. And in the initial round, there was no way to help shape the questions they should have been asking. All we could do is write a response. And eventually they got to several stages, some months down the line, where they asked for a design. And I refused to offer a design on the basis of lack of information, whilst everyone else did offer a design. They came back to us and said, you're absolutely right. How could you possibly design something without the relevant data and input? We ultimately won the contract and were awarded on the basis that we truly understood the requirements of the clients and the needs, and therefore had designed something that was absolutely fit for purpose. And coming back to a very simple analogy that we can all understand, I will give a simplified example. I might receive a phone call from somebody saying, we've been told to give you a call, we need some security, can you provide us a design and specification for CCTV? And Finbar used the word and expression just now before he spoke, and the point he made was why? And that is exactly what I say to the client. I say, why? And they will say, well, we just told you we need security. And I will say, why again? And eventually the penny drops. And in my simplified example, when I tell this story, the client will eventually say to me, well, my wife's just inherited £1 million of jewelry from her great aunt in London that died. And I might say, shall we start with a safe then? To try and make the point that security is not about a safe, a security officer, close protection, an alarm. It is about how we collaborate and bring all of those ingredients together as if we were baking a cake. And if we want it to be great, we need to get the right ingredients in the right quantities into our design. And then you have something that is truly fit for purpose. And to finish off, yes, certain specialists are going to be more expensive. And the reason that they're going to be more expensive, not only in our guarding sector of our business, but in our security, well, all sectors, we want to employ people that are very, very good. And to attract very good people costs money, and to keep them engaged in their business costs money. So if you really do want to have the best, then there is a price that you pay for it. But on the flip side of the coin, I have had designs that we've made, for example, and again, I'll use a CCTV one, for a port authority where all the competitors quoted for 250 cameras, and we designed it and did it with 188 cameras. They were much more expensive, but they cost similarly or just under the price of the 250. But what they did do was the job that was required, because a thorough assessment was done so that the CCTV could work in conjunction with the manpower and the guards on duty. So by being intelligent, and it comes back to this educating officers, purchasing officers, that making better decisions, and it is our responsibility to try and force that on them to drag this information out of them.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let me come to Gaitan here, and I want to just pick up on something. I've got a question here from Rich Willop. Now, Rich is a senior corporate security director in the United States of a global company. And he wrote to me and he said, you know, one of the things that doesn't get spoken about very much, but is a thing to manage, and I'd like your view on it, is the tendency or the worry that you may bias a certain company or a certain product on the basis of experience or on the basis of a limited amount of knowledge, but some sort of almost unconscious bias. Is that a danger, and how do you guard against it?
We procurement professionals or specialists, we believe on experience. That a company with experience, the company could deliver value to us, but it's a process to determine that experience, not only to say that this company has this experience. So through the tender process, we need to do a post-qualification, a post-mortem of the vendor or of the bidder to testify that he has a qualified or he has extensive experience with regard to our services. So we'll need even some time to do a reference check, a physical reference check to the customers or to the clients of that company. So experience matters, but it needs a scrutiny to determine that experience could give us what we are expecting. Not only to hear that this company is in the industry and it's doing better and rely on that information. We need to put parameters like financial parameters. For example, we can't offer or we can't award a big contract to the company that has no experience of managing that big contract with such big amount of money, because they had no experience of managing that amount of money. We could give them those money, and instead of delivering to what we are expecting, they could spend the money to other stuff. So it's a number of stuff, ranging from average turnover of the company, experience in number of years, as well as what their clients say, testify to us, could lead us to determine that experience could be used to determine a company that could provide services to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Finn. But let me come to you on this issue that Rich has raised, because I'm interested in your view, in your role. I mean, amongst sort of fellow corporate security professionals. I mean, to what extent is this an issue? bias to those we know, or the bias to those that we've got some understanding of, that may or may not be rational. I guess the point is where it's done without proper tests or proper thinking, because that doesn't open up the market quite as much if we think like that. Finbar, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think you used the word bias there, and I think that's really important. I think, again, if you do a thorough risk assessment of your why, and then you look at who can actually achieve that. I mean, we have, you know, in the security industry, we all know the big brands, right? The big corporate brands, and we know that if we go to them, we're safe. As security managers, we're safe. And if they fail, then they failed because they didn't understand the brief. If we go to a small local vendor and they fail, it's because we failed as managers. And again, it comes back to the discussion the point I raised earlier. This is about fear. It's about, you know, stepping up and holding your hand up and saying, guys, I need help here to understand. In my experience, working on global programs, you know, some of the big corporate brands are not the companies you're going to go to in locations like Johannesburg. You want a local ground crew, somebody who knows the industry, somebody who knows the people on the ground. In other programs where you're managing a massive global program, you may need to look elsewhere for your services. But I think it is a case of understanding your risk. It is a case of understanding what those vendors can bring to the table. And to Gaitan's point, you need to know the right questions to ask. And when you put the KPIs together, because ultimately your KPIs should be the questions you asked in the first place. I, for one, have never had the KPI of billing mitigate any risk for me. And yet every tender I've been involved in, the first KPI on the list is billing. Did I get my invoices on time? These are some of the challenges that we face. And again, we need to understand our risk. We need to drive the conversation, but the bias is the problem. We need to hold our hand up and say, hey, folks in the industry, help me out here. What are you doing and why are you doing it that way?
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Roberto, I wonder whether I could come to you about Simon Cham has put some questions down, and running through those, is this bit about, okay, and you raised this in your opening statement, this bit about we need to communicate, we've got to get people thinking about how we do this differently. It seems almost the more people are talking, a multifaceted issue, which is so much more complex and so much more dynamic. But I wonder whether we're just learning here that this comes down to two things: the quality and the status of the corporate security team, and the quality and the status of the status, I don't mean, I mean knowledge and expertise of the supplier, because if they're good, the procurement professional can be guided accordingly. But in getting those two right, there's an enormous amount to it, isn't there, Roberto? And I'm just wondering where the point about communicate how. Where do you start with this? It seems as an expert, as an outsider, listening to you three, an enormity.
You've sort of hit the nail on the head there, Martin, and we've been alluding to this through this conversation. Security is such a huge and diverse subject matter, and product is one element, manpower is another, purchasing is another, but we're not addressing another fundamental issue which none of us have control over, and that is the way in which crime or attacks or things happen. And of course, the phases and the trends that come along. And through my 41 years officially in this business, I have seen different crime waves, different methods of attack and gaining entry, all the way through from domestic breaches and scenes of crime through to terror risks. So when we look at all of what's going on, the challenge of how we communicate is to try and get our purchasers to understand this is a massive subject. There are very, very few people that really understand it. It's not like all of us can go to learn French or Spanish. and we'll all master it to a certain extent, depending how much effort and capability we have in the subject. Security is something that is mastered, I think, by very few. It is rather like the subject matter of medicine. You will have specialist surgeons in certain areas. Very rarely all of them are brilliant at all areas of their work. And this is the challenge that security faces.
Yeah, now, Gaitan, that is an interesting answer, right? What you've learned from Finbar and from Roberto there is that, and this is the difficulty for procurement, okay? It is extremely complex. It's clear that not everyone's got that expertise. Most procurement couldn't possibly know. I mean, all they can do is go to the expert and presumably hope or that person's up for the task. But I was wondering whether there's a way in which you could check that, guys. And is there a way? How do you reassure yourself, or perhaps you don't see it necessary to reassure yourself? Gaitan, your full thoughts on this first, please.
Yeah, me as a procurement specialist, it's my duty to make sure that I bring value to the corporate or to the organization. And how could I bring value? It's through the technical people or through the user departments. So most of the time, it's my priority to make sure that teamwork is there. I can't go through without having a teamwork with the users, with the user departments. So these are the very important people during the requisitioning of the services to make sure that we have a procurement requirement document, which is very complete of the services that we are looking for from the market. My duty is just to compile, to put together all the tender documents, the solicitation documents, and float them in the market. So it's very impossible to say that procurement could run the show yourself. You need the help of the technical people, of the security experts to make sure that the organization could at last could achieve what it expects. So this is more of the teamwork other than working on the silos. Thanks.
Oh, okay. So let me come quickly back to Finbar, if I might. I'd like to just get a question to all of you, if I might. So I want to be very brief. If I could ask you to be very brief, we're running out of time. And Finbar, it's about Simon Pearce's second part of his question, where he says, how closely aligned are corporate security teams with their company's strategic direction? And here behind Simon's question, if I could add something, I'll ask all of you this, but let me start with you, Finbar. Do you think corporate security are really up to the task of modern security management in aligning with corporate security, corporate objective, in understanding business strategy and being able to interpret that in security teams? Are modern security managers, is your peer group really up for the task? Briefly, if you wouldn't mind, Finbar.
10 years ago, I would have said no. 10 years ago, I would have said there was a significant disconnect. I believe that over the last 10 years, the corporate security function has moved dramatically in the direction of understanding business and understanding the strategy of the business and converting that strategy into a risk mitigation program. Is it as widespread as we would like in the industry? No, it's not. Not every business is as progressive as some of the big US corporates out there at the moment. But I believe we're going in the right direction. But I think there is an understanding within the industry now that there is such thing as a corporate strategy, and that if we sit outside of that corporate strategy, then we sit outside of the business and we're not offering the best service to our internal customers.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Roberto, now, Roberto, surely you don't believe that corporate security teams are up to the task? They're way out of alignment, aren't they, Roberto?
Without you even provoking it, I was shaking my head intentionally because I don't think so. And I don't mean it in an offensive way. I mean it in the sense that I've already discussed how complex security is, and very few of the purchasing officers or corporate security, whoever it is, has the scope and the capability to globally oversee from a holistic point of view how they would pull together a security solution. And what they tend to do is to get bogged down in the easier things, which is my camera's got better resolution than yours and it costs £10 less than this one. And they focus on the things they can control because they don't have the experience for the wider, broader spectrum things. And therefore, not wishing to disagree with Finbar, in fact, I don't disagree because I agree on the point that I think it's improved. I just don't think it's improved anywhere near enough. And there is a lot more work that is needed in that sector.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Gaitan, as a procurement professional, rather than a security professional, and I'm going to ask you to be brief because we're running out of time here. Gaitan, is security different to other areas, or would you expect exactly the same sorts of issues cropping up, whatever the sector, industry in question? Gaitan, as a procurement professional, what's your view?
Yeah, my view is the way security is handled, it could be maybe different with the way services are procured and the way other categories, for example, goods are procured. So security and the other services are of the similar nature in the procurement, and compared to goods, which most of them are off-the-shelf goods. So once we are procuring security, we need to have more attention to make sure that the teamwork is there, and so as we could achieve what we are expecting. And also the security or the services requirements or whatever kind of procurement that is made, it should be in line, or at last should be in line with the corporate objectives. Why am I saying that? Without having that means that the security teams or the services team, it will be out of the organization. Why we intend that every team or every requirement that is needed, it should be aiming at achieving the corporate objectives. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna stop here because I'm gonna get one quick question in, and you've got 10 seconds each. That's how brutal I'm going to be with your final question, and it's this: if you had a magic wand and you could make one strategic change to improve the procurement of security, what would you wish for? 10 seconds each, no more. I'll cut you off after 10 seconds, but I've got to go. Finbar, tell us what you're going to wish for.
Remove security managers' egos from the process.
Okay, very interesting. Roberto.
Agree fully with Finbar, but in addition, strategic alliances to forge stronger relationships to open these discussions up.
Okay, makes sense to me. And what would you wish for, Gaitan, out of interest, as the external to security on this?
Yeah, on my side, I will embrace the teamwork to make sure that the procurement team is getting support of the security experts to make sure that all the procurement process and the steps and as well as the stages are going well to make sure that we achieve what the organization or the corporate is expecting.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, we could go on. There is so much here. I really enjoyed that conversation, actually. And I think, to be honest, what it shows is just how complex this is. I mean, I think that's what I learned from it. Well, look, we'll no doubt be returning to it. Don't forget, a copy of the blog will be on the website tomorrow, incorporating the sorts of issues that the panel raised today. A few final comments from me, very briefly, if I might. Just to say, the OSPAs are open in Romania, the US, the Benelux, Canada, and South Africa. And the TAC Economic Crime Awards, they close on the 8th of October, and the Cyber OSPAs on the 15th of August. So Techers is the 8th of August, Cyber OSPAs the 15th of August. Don't delay, get your entries in before it's too late. Next Thursday, we're at IFSEC in London. We're on stand IF 2437. Please do come and see us. I'll be there Tuesday and Thursday. And just to say that although we're not back next week because we're at IFSEC, the following week, How else can security contribute to preparing for the worst? That's 2 weeks today, and 2 weeks tomorrow. We have the New Zealand OSPAs taking place in Auckland. So I'll be in Auckland joining the New Zealand security sector, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So thank you once again to my panel. Thank you once again to you, the audience, for your participation. Some great conversations and some great issues. I very much hope to see you either next week in London or in Auckland, or back here on the webinar in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, wherever we meet, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.